Our forthcoming presenter is also the international English language teaching colleague at American Bashkir InterCollege with a vast teaching experience overseas and here in Ufa at American Bashkir InterCollege. Over more than 10 years of his teaching at the InterCollege, most of the English language teaching community in Ufa and Bashkortostan, and that is around 3,000 colleagues, have come to work with Jeremy Savage. That's the name of our next presenter. His workshop deals with games and fun activities. And so it is games and fun activities to enhance learning in the English as a foreign language classroom. Jeremy Savage is our senior instructor in modern English studies and English cross-cultural communications. He is the holder of a CELTA EFL fellow degree. Dear Jeremy, thank you very much for joining us here. Thank you. It is an opportune time to tell you that we appreciate really very much indeed your invaluable support of the American Bashkir InterCollege. And thank you again for joining our platform here in Ufa. Please welcome to the virtual forum and take the floor, please. Over to you, Jeremy.
Thank you, Vyacheslav Dmitrievich. Thank you, everyone. It's good to see you. I know this is virtual format, so it's a little bit different than the way things have been in the years past, but we are obviously making the best of it. And I'm very glad to see you today and spend some time with you. I think some of you I know very well. Yes, Vera is waving. Vera, nice to see you too. And some of you maybe I don't know as well, but I'm glad to make your acquaintance today. So, yes, as was stated, I will be taking a look today at games and fun activities to enhance learning in the EFL classroom. But that is really a very broad subject, and we could spend the entire day talking about that. And so I'd like to kind of narrow the focus down specifically to the aspect of what activities, what can we be doing in order to encourage memorization and vocabulary and words sticking in our minds as we look at language. Activities and games and things that we can do to help students be able to really grab onto words and hold on to them to be able to use. Before we do that, let me just say a few things about myself. I'm almost a Bashkir, I guess you could say. I've lived here in Bashkortostan for 10 years. So I can say, Halmahugath to everyone. It's a great pleasure. And I really enjoy it here. I enjoy my time here, working here, speaking with students and working with teachers as well. It's a beautiful place, beautiful area, and it reminds me of my childhood where I was born, because I was born in Canada, and in Canada, nature and the weather and many things are very similar. In fact, tea is very popular in Canada too, and there was a lot of tea being drunk in Canada, and I find the same here. In fact, one time here, I was in a Bashkir village for 3 days, and can you guess how many cups of tea I drank in 3 days? Hospitality here is incredible. Any guesses how many cups of tea? If you guessed, I'm seeing some guesses starting to come in on the chat. Yes, feel free, if you're bold, if you're brave, you can always use the chat to make your guesses. Some of you are actually very close. So I will tell you, I drank about 34 cups of tea in 3 days, 34 cups of tea. That is a lot more tea than we drink in Canada, but still, there's many similarities between Canada and here. And so just being here, when I was 13 years old, my family moved from Canada to the United States. And so my parents are not Canadian, they are American. My father worked in Canada, and so because of that, I was born in Canada, which means I'm a dual citizen, Canadian and American. And so, and who knows, maybe someday I will be Russian too, a third citizenship, who knows. But 10 years here in Bashkortostan has been fantastic, wonderful experience, wonderful time. And I'm excited to just continue here. My family is here as well, 3 children. And yes, just enjoy the work, enjoy the teaching. The students are fantastic. The vast majority of them are excited about learning English. And for those that are not excited about learning English, at least their parents are very excited about them learning English, as many of you probably know and see in your lessons and in your groups as well. So now I'm going to share my screen and start my presentation with you. All right, very good. So specifically focusing here on tools for expanding the memory of our students as we focus on trying to learn English language, and some activities that hopefully will be helpful as part of the process. First of all, why memorize? Obviously, this is a very easy question. Memorizing is something that we cannot do without. As much as we would like to do without at times, it is something that we cannot do without in language learning. And especially if we want to be able to recall words. I don't know how many of you at times you're speaking to somebody and suddenly you reach a word and you're like, I know this word, but somehow it slipped my mind and I can't remember it. It's happened to all of us, I'm sure. It even happens to me as a native speaker, speaking in my own language in front of my students. Sometimes I'll have an embarrassing moment where suddenly I cannot remember a word. So obviously memorization is very important in helping us to be able to recall those words at moments when we need them. But let's move on to something I'd like to emphasize. One aspect of memorization is it's a tool, and this tool is something that can be used kind of ineffectively. And unfortunately, I've seen this many times when it comes to memorizing words. Maybe some of you have experienced this as well, just kind of being handed lists of words from your teachers or maybe in the lesson, in the book, and you're just handed this list of words that you need to memorize that goes with the lesson. And so you start diligently trying to work on these words, and it seems like half of the words are words that are not interesting to you, words that you wouldn't necessarily use in a normal conversation, that you don't need for your sphere. And so then you go out and it's difficult for you to use these words because there's very few opportunities for you to use these words. They're just kind of useless words. And that is not something we want to emphasize with memorizing. It needs to be focused on words that actually are useful. Words that are connected together with patterns. Words that help us actually to communicate in ways that we want to communicate. Words that are interesting to our students, along topics that are interesting to our students. Another aspect of memorizing, you've heard it said maybe if you say the word 100 times, then you'll have memorized it. But I find myself sometimes, because I'm also trying to learn Russian language while I'm here, and I will pronounce a word and say it 100 times, and as my mouth is saying it, my mind starts to wander and think about cheeseburgers and ice cream or something else. And while my mouth is repeating the words, my brain is disengaged. And so in a sense, my mouth memorizes the word, but my brain doesn't. And this does not help me in recalling words. So sometimes repeating can be helpful, of course, but it's only while our brains are engaged. And then, of course, translation. Translation has its place as well. Translation is important, but we need to be careful with translation. Because if we strictly rely on translation to help us in learning language and being able to communicate well, translation, unfortunately, will slow us down. Why? Because that's not how we learn language naturally. The natural way to learn language is with association, not with translation. And so as we associate and picture in our mind objects or things or experiences or feelings that are connected with the words that we're learning, and be able to work through those associations, we are going to be able to recall and speak much more clearly and much more quickly than we would if we were having to work through translation. Translation is a tool and a method where our brains will work extremely hard, but our mouths, unfortunately, will work extremely slowly. And so it's better in most instances, especially if we're focusing on communication and direct communication, to avoid translation and stick to other ways of visualizing things and connecting words with things in a more real way. So we have to be careful of these things when it comes to memorizing. Now, I, again, would love some interaction here. So feel free to use the chat to write down, if you're bold, if you're brave, what you think the answer to these questions are. Because the question is, well then, Jeremy, how many words do I need to memorize when it comes to language in order to be effective? Well, let's start with this first question, all right? The first question is, how many current words are there in the English language? Roughly. This doesn't have to be specifically, but roughly in the English language, how many words do you feel that there are? Feel free to make your guess. You can write it in the chat, or at least mentally try to think how many words. Looking at Google would be cheating. But see if you can think. Anybody, any guesses? If you grabbed the Webster dictionary, roughly how many words do you think would be in the dictionary? Any guesses? Any thoughts? No guesses. Everyone's too afraid to make a guess in the chat. Oh, great. We've got some guesses here. Excellent. Great guesses. All different numbers. Anything from 100,000 to 1,000. So, or 40,000. Well, good guesses, everyone. How many current words in the English language? Well, maybe it'll surprise you, but there are more than 170,000, more than 170,000. So some of you were actually pretty close. More than 170,000 words in the English language. Wow, do we have to learn that many words to become fluent in English? Do we have to memorize that many words? Well, does Jeremy, myself as a native speaker, do I know that many words myself? Absolutely not. There's no way. In fact, many of those words I myself don't even know, or just have a very sort of passing knowledge of, maybe I've seen before. Many of those words are very specific to specific situations and instances and spheres, literary words. And so no. How many words does the average English speaker actually use? So in thinking about somebody like myself, Jeremy, how many words do you think I use? Good. Good guesses coming in. Great. Fantastic. Any more guesses? I love interaction, even if it's online interaction. Great. Good guesses. Excellent. All right, let's see how close you are. So the average English speaker uses about 12,000 words. So Alsu is exactly right. She must know something. 12,000 words. Words to be native. So in order to understand About 80% of English texts, about 80%. How many words do I need to understand to get about 80%? Any guesses? Feel free to write your guesses in. It must be something less than 12,000, of course. Maybe something far less than 12,000. Good guesses. Good guesses. Excellent. All right, let's see how close you are. About 2,000. Yes. So Alsu is correct again. She must have heard something about this before. Yes, good job. And some of you are very close. 80% of English text, about 2,000 words. So that's pretty doable. That's better. Remember, this is about average, so it's not exact number. Okay, and the final question then. How many words do I need to acquire in order to speak fluently? How many words do I need to learn to get into my brain in order to speak fluently? What thoughts do you have? It must be something more than 2,000. Good guesses, good guesses. Everybody's guessing the same amount. Great. Good interaction, good guesses. There's some differences. Fantastic. Great. Okay, let's see how close you are. If you said between 5,000 and 6,000, you are correct. So in order to speak fluently on almost all topics, you need about 5,000 or 6,000 words. Now still, of course, that's a lot of words to learn. But it's nice to know that in order to be able to understand about 80%, I just need about 2,000 words. So this is really helpful to know that learning English is not impossible, not insurmountable, but very doable. It takes some memorization, but it's very possible. And so, again, all of this is to help us remember that we want to focus on the words we need. It's not about just memorizing any words in English. We want to focus on exactly what words do we need in order to accomplish the goal of being able to understand and communicate with people in general. So what are some ways that we can memorize? What do I use in my lessons in the classroom? The number one thing I use, before we get into that, yes, just a reminder, fluency. One thing I want to say about fluency. Fluency, many people think fluency is becoming like a native in your speech, which must mean you become very advanced in your speech. But fluency actually is not about how high your level is. Fluency is being able to speak native-like at any level you are at. So for example, if you're at the beginner level, it's learning to become a fluent beginner. A fluent beginner is somebody who speaks very low level, who has very limited knowledge, very limited vocabulary, very limited grammar, but what they know, they can speak very well without a lot of pauses or forgetting or confusion. They can say, hello, my name is Jeremy. I live in Ufa. They can say, I have a family. I am happy. They can say these words and phrases. It's beginner level, but it is fluent beginner level. So a mistake that people make sometimes is trying to reach the higher levels before becoming fluent at their own level. And that can be a mistake because the higher the level, the more challenging, the broader the amount of vocabulary we need and grammar understanding, And so it's important to have those foundations really solid before jumping up and up and up and up, making sure that we're fluent at each level. And that involves, of course, memorization. That involves practice. That involves taking words that I know I will use and choosing the words that I know I will use. So let's get to the tools then. Number one tool that I use, of course, is flashcards. I love flashcards. Flashcards are so fun. They are great because it's focused especially on association. Whether it's with PowerPoint or with actual pictures or photos that I'm showing in the classroom, even if it's something on my telephone that I'm showing students, whatever it is, if I can directly show the concept without translation, directly associate the word with the meaning, it is a good thing. And so, and of course, there's many games we can play with flashcards as well. Competitions, who can say the word the fastest when I show the picture, or put the pictures out on a table and have two students come up and say the word, and then which student can point to or take the picture first. There's many ways that we can use flashcards actively for students, giving the flashcards to the students and having them try to describe it and having other students guess which flashcard they have. So many ways we can use it, but the most important thing is it gives association very simply. So this is like my foundation. It's number one above anything else. Secondly, another thing I like to use is mind maps. Maybe you've seen this before, mind maps, where you start with a word, a topic, and then you try to pull from the students all connected words that go with that word, and map it out on the board in different ways so that students can see the relationship between the words and connect them together. This again is building connection between words and so able to build on their vocabulary, as well as helping them to see. And of course, if you're a good artist, or even if you're a bad artist, you can try to draw pictures that go with the words as well, like you see here, or you can ask the students to draw pictures that go with the words and create a beautiful mind map. So that's another tool that I enjoy using with students. Next, synonyms and antonyms. I especially love to play games with this. I will actually break my students into groups, and then I will say a word, and whichever group can quickly say the antonym of the word gets 1 point for their team. And so it helps students, again, associate words together with their opposites. So, and also helps them, of course, with remembering what these words mean. So this is something I do often with my students as well, in a fun competition or game format, synonyms and antonyms. Another way, of course, is definition, but be careful with this. I try, especially with the higher level groups, I still try to avoid using Russian language. And so if the students are able to do this, I try to ask them to give definitions in English, not in Russian for a word. There are times even where I will split them into groups or pairs, and I will write a word down on the board, and I'll say, let's see which group or which pair can make the best definition in English for this word. For example, the word love. Who can make a good definition of the word love in English language? And let them work on that for a few minutes and then hear what they come up with. Another tool. This is helping them use the words. If we're learning new words, how can we use these new words in sentences? So let's see how long of a sentence we can make using this word. And so, for example, the word read, to read. Tom reads. And so we add to the sentence, and see if the students can say the sentence as it gets longer and longer and longer and longer, to help them repeat and associate the word in its use. Something I really like, of course, is fun associations. Fun associations. If we're learning the word lawyer, and my uncle is a lawyer, then I try to associate in my mind, okay, when I'm trying to think of this word, think of my uncle. Who is my uncle? What does he do? And try to connect the word lawyer with my uncle's profession. This is how I learned I love you in Russian language. I learned just to say yellow blue bus. Я люблю вас. It was a good way to try to associate. So any way that we can figure out, it can be crazy ways, but association is very helpful. And if we must learn something, if we need to prepare for an exam or test something, and there is words or phrases that we absolutely need to learn, whether they are interesting or boring, how could we do that? How could we quickly learn? For example, this sentence, the woman that sold pearls on the beach now sells seashells on the seashore every day from morning to night. Wow, how could we quickly learn this sentence? Something I like to do is put it up on the board, maybe associate each phrase with pictures, and then one by one, start removing parts of the sentence or the phrase and have the students repeat it every time that we take part of it out. So bit by bit, every time we are taking out parts of the sentence and repeating the sentence over and over again, or the phrase or whatever it is, until we get to the end and there's absolutely nothing on the board. And yet, as always is the case, the group can say and repeat the entire thing without any trouble. And sometimes we'll see how slowly and how quickly we can do this. So those are some tools that I find useful and helpful for us as in working with students for memorization. I just have some resources that I'm throwing up here on the screen that can be helpful. Maybe you are familiar with some of these resources. Some of them are free. Some of them are not free, or some of them have free versions or limited versions, but they all have various things that they focus on, but they've been helpful as well for me in as resources for working with students in memorizing vocabulary and memorizing words. So, any questions about anything at this time?
Our next presentation, which is forthcoming, actually two presentations from a plenary and a workshop.